Chapter 45-64. After Yi-Huan asked, Shun-Ting's face turned even redder. He tugged at the little fellow's short hair. "I'm a little hot." Qin Yi-Huan covered her little face, looking surprised. "You can feel hot in this kind of weather?" "Brother, you're different from others." "What's different?" Shun-Ting was curious. Yi-Huan mumbled, "You don't mean what you say. That's why I'm different." Shun-Ting's eyes widened. He couldn't believe that he had been fooled by a little kid. Moreover, it was a kid that he liked. He stared at the little fellow's little face, his voice getting hoarser. "What do you mean by saying one thing, but meaning what you say?" Little Yi-Huan didn't say anything. She just climbed onto his knees and reached out to touch his face before saying, "It's a little hot." Seeing her like this, Shun-Ting abruptly grabbed her little hand, his expression also very uncomfortable and a little scary. At least little Yi-Huan was a little scared. She looked at him and said in a low voice, "Brother, what's wrong?" Shun-Ting's expression was still very unnatural, but he still cared about the child's feelings. He reached out to cover her eyes and said in a low voice, "Nothing. I just thought of something." When she couldn't see him, he let out a long breath. His breath brushed against little Yi-Huan's little face. It was warm, and the baby felt so comfortable. She giggled. Shun-Ting exhaled again. What a little fool. He didn't do anything else but cover her eyes. After a while, Yi-Huan said strangely, "Brother, you must have not done well in your exams. You're going to get a double score." Shun-Ting didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Where did this child's brain come from? He put down his hand and looked at her. "I get first place in the whole of B City every time." In fact, he could go to America to study, but he had to stay with her in B City for 3 years. It wasn't Qin Mo's request, it was his. These 3 years hadn't been easy for him either. Other than his own homework, he had to learn about finance. Uncle Qin didn't just have to manage King Entertainment. In fact, the Qin family's business had long been involved in many aspects. The entertainment industry was just the tip of the iceberg. Shun-Ting was under a lot of pressure. However, with this little cutie, the days should not be lonely anymore. Little Yi-Huan grabbed his hand, her eyes still blinking. After a while, she said, "Brother, Mom and Dad should be done kissing, right?" When she said that, Shun-Ting's face actually felt a little hot again. He gently turned his face away. "I'll go downstairs first. You go take a look. If it's okay, come find me first." Yi-Huan let out a long "oh" before looking at Shun-Ting suspiciously. "Brother, are you shy?" "No," Shun-Ting replied quickly, looking a little flustered. On the other hand, Yi-Huan dragged her voice, "But why do I feel like you're blushing? You seem embarrassed." "Actually, Brother Shun-Ting, you don't have to be embarrassed. There are many shows like this on TV, and..." Shun-Ting was a little incredulous. "You see this?" Yi-Huan looked at him as if he was an idiot. "It's all on TV." "Brother, you haven't seen it before?" "I haven't seen it before," he said bluntly. His parents were also very conservative. They were busy with scheming and grooming him. They didn't have time for such romance. He had only seen it live once, and that was with Qin Mo and Yi-Huan. So this was how kissing was. Like new wife number 1. Hubby addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby addicted to pampering. My phone was the fastest to update. Chapter 45-65. After Shun-Ting said that, Yi-Huan looked at him eagerly and saw the suspicious blush on his face. "Brother, you're blushing again." Little Yi-Huan let out a strange cry and climbed onto Shun-Ting's knees. She cupped his face with her little hands and looked at him from left to right curiously. Shun-Ting's face turned even redder. He turned his face away awkwardly and said in a low voice, "I'm not." Little Yi-Huan smiled evilly. "Brother, you are. Your face is red again." Then, as she hopped down, she turned her head and made a face at Shun-Ting. Shun-Ting then whispered a few words. However, Qin Yi-Huan couldn't hear him anymore and ran away. Shun-Ting let out a long sigh and got up to go downstairs to wait. He sat on the sofa and flipped through a magazine to kill time and hide the throbbing in his heart. She was too young. It would be a long process for her to grow up, and it would be a painful and sweet process. Qin Mo and Yi-Huan went downstairs. Yi-Huan was in front. She jumped over and called him brother. Shinting looked up. Are you done? He was really a good-looking and elegant boy. When he stood up, even Yi-Huan couldn't help but be blinded. Shinting's appearance was no worse than Qin Mo's when he was young. In fact, he looked more gentle. Qin Mo saw that Yi-Huan was distracted. President Qin's heart was filled with jealousy. He stared at Yi-Huan for a long time before he snorted. Mrs. Qin, let me remind you that Shinting is only 13. Yi-Huan actually knew, but she pretended not to know. She glanced at Qin Mo and smiled. That doesn't stop me from admiring you. Qin Mo pinched her cheek. Mrs. Qin, I'm not enough for you to look at. Do you need to look at someone else? Qin Mo, you're getting old. Yi-Huan's eyes were filled with hidden bitterness. Mr. Qin was about to explode. He gritted his teeth. Yi-Huan, what did you say? I'm old. Yi-Huan said fearlessly, Yes, you're old. Qin Mo wanted to strangle her. He narrowed his eyes. Mrs. Qin, I'm not 40 yet. Yi-Huan smiled and said, Yeah, he's not even 40 yet, so he's only 25 years older than Shinting. No, it's New Year. I'm 26. He was already at the bottom of the stairs. Yi-Huan reached out and grabbed his collar. You'll be 40 next year, Mr. Qin. Miss He, you're already 33. You're past the age of being spoiled. From now on, you're not. Qin Mo held her hand and snorted. Fine, I won't, Yi-Huan mumbled. You'll beg me. Qin Mo was amused and annoyed at the same time. He pulled her hair and said in a low voice, You're so sure that I'm yours, aren't you? Yi-Huan's face was full of pride. Yes, I'm yours. Qin Mo smiled. It was a meaningful smile. Yi-Huan glared at him and said in a low voice, You're shameless. How am I shameless? You're the one who said it. Qin Mo smiled happily. Yi-Huan ignored him. She walked over and pulled Yi-Huan and Shinting into the car. Qin Mo, on the other hand, walked slowly behind them. He lit a cigarette and finished it outside the car. Yi-Huan wasn't a patient person. She waited for about 2 minutes and rolled down the window. She looked at Qin Mo and said, How long are you going to smoke? New wife number 1. Honey, I'm addicted to spoiling. New wife number 1. Honey, I'm addicted to spoiling. My phone was updated the fastest. Chapter 45-66. Yi-Huan wasn't a patient person. After waiting for about 2 minutes, she couldn't help but wind down the window and look at Qin Mo. How much longer are you going to smoke? Qin Mo smiled, took a few deep puffs, and then put out the cigarette before getting into the car. Qin Mo fastened his seatbelt, turned on the GPS, and said casually, Let's eat out tonight. No one had any objections, so Qin Mo started the car. The car drove slowly on the streets of B-City. On the way, Qin Mo received a call from Secretary He, saying that the schedule for 214 had been arranged, but there were only 17% of the screenings. Secretary He said worriedly, President Qin, there might be some trouble in the future with such a schedule. After all, it's a commercial film, and artistic films aren't popular. Do you want to do something about it? Qin Mo held the steering wheel with one hand and asked casually, What about the screenings after the screening? Have they been locked in? This was the usual method to prevent the theater from making adjustments. Even if they bought 2 tickets online, the movie would still have to be shown. AIG's company was using this method, which was why Twin couldn't get any resources. After Qin Mo finished speaking, Secretary He said, From the 15th to the 20th, there were a lot of screenings that were locked in. I don't think there's enough momentum, but there's nothing they can do about it. Got it, Qin Mo said simply and hung up. Yi-Huan knew what they were talking about. She wanted to ask, but she swallowed her words. Qin Mo naturally knew what she wanted to ask, so he patted her hand to comfort her. I'll solve it. Yi-Huan nodded and turned to look at him, then thought for a moment. Qin Mo, it's fine as long as you tried your best. Everything else isn't important. I don't care about fame and fortune, but AI Meng Meng. I really think it's not easy for her to be like this and wrong you. Qin Mo's voice had a hint of a smile. I know. Then he said in a slightly hoarse voice, Don't worry, everything will be solved. He freed a hand and pinched her soft and tender face. His voice suddenly became hoarse. Even if I have to get $1 billion. Yi-Huan's eyes widened and he shrieked. Qin Mo, are you crazy? Why don't you keep the 1 billion for me to spend? Qin and Mo chuckled. This move will bring about a rise in the stock market. We'll be able to earn back what we lost. All right, I forgot to tell you that King Entertainment is the main producer of this film. Even if it's for my sake, don't you think we should make it look better? He Huan was speechless. Qin and Mo, you don't have to do this. It's a project that doesn't make money. Qin and Mo smiled. We'll know later whether we can earn it or not. But isn't it the same for you or me? He Huan understood that it was different. She muttered in a low voice, and then did not say anything more. Actually, Qin and Mo understood what she wanted to say. The car stopped in the parking lot of a plaza. Qin and Mo unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to Shun Ting in the back seat. Bring the phone and bring Yihuan. I'll give you an hour and a half. Your Annie and I will be at the Starbucks on the first floor. Shun Ting nodded, opened the car door and got out, even carrying the little one. Yihuan was very happy because she could go shopping alone with her brother. But she did not expect to meet Brother Xiangnan. Like new wife number 1, hubby addicted to pampering. New wife number 1, hubby addicted to pampering. My mobile phone updates are the fastest. Chapter 4567. At the entrance of a children's clothing store, Yi Xiangnan and Bai Anan were both there. Wen Yuan brought them there. Bai Anan picked out the clothes and was about to leave when she saw Shun Ting and Qin Yihuan coming over. They were caught off guard. Shun Ting didn't expect to meet Yi Xiangnan so early. That boy was born into a good family and was 1 year younger than him. He was about the same height and was also very good looking. However, probably because of his body, his skin was very white, so he looked especially gentle and noble. Shun Ting looked at him quietly. Suddenly, his hand loosened, and the baby he was holding jumped over. Brother Xiangnan. Yi Xiangnan was originally standing, but he also looked at Shun Ting with a slightly deep gaze. He was also aware of the arrangements made by his family. He also liked Yihuan very much. She was beautiful and had a cute personality. If nothing went wrong, he was indeed going to marry Yihuan. However, there seemed to be a little accident now. He also knew that Shun Ting had appeared. In the Yi family, Yi Mubai would tell him everything that was related to him, including Yihuan's matters and Qin Mo's arrangements. He could accept it, because Qin and Mo didn't have a son, and the Qin family obviously didn't want Qin Yihuan to live too hard. In fact, Shun Ting's arrangements were actually the biggest pressure on Shun Ting, not Yi Xiangnan. As long as he grew up and didn't like Yihuan so much, Yi Xiangnan thought in his heart. Then a small and soft and fat person jumped into his arms. He was stuffed full. He lowered his head and said in a slightly low voice, Yihuan. Yihuan hugged him and kissed him like a kitten. Brother Xiangnan. Yi Xiangnan lowered his head and reached out to touch her little head. Why are you here? Where are Uncle Qin and Annie Qin? Yihuan was only 7 years old. She was at the age where she was naive and ignorant. So how could she know what Yi Xianan was scheming? Thus, she enthusiastically and straightforwardly introduced, Brother Xianan, this is Brother Shun Ting. She even pulled Yi Xiangnan over. Wen Yuan and Bai Anan watched from the side without doing anything. Bai Anan even asked Wen Yuan in a low voice, Auntie, is Xiangnan jealous? Wen Yuan was also particularly helpless. She knew that Xiangnan liked Yihuan. Although she had never said it, she could tell that Xiangnan did not reject the family's arrangements. Shun Ting was also very outstanding. She had to admit that Qin and Mo had a good taste. Besides, the Qin family was not wrong. The children were still young. Who knew what the future would be like? The Qin family was double insurance. If Xiangnan couldn't even accept this, it meant that his psychological endurance was too weak. If he lost to Shun Ting, it would only mean that Shun Ting was more suitable for Yihuan. Wen Yuan was very open-minded. Then, he whispered to Bai Anan, probably. Bai Anan smiled. Her smile was light and carefree. Her personality was very similar to Yi Mulan. At this moment, when Yuan looked at her and thought that Xue Li's genes were not reflected in this child. In the past, she actually looked like Bai Xue Li. But now, she looked more and more like Mulan. Actually, there was nothing wrong with looking like Mulan. It was just that her personality was becoming more and more indifferent. She was too calm. Wen Yuan smiled faintly, then looked at Yi Xianan again. She knew that her son was a little frustrated because he didn't get complete approval. Boys at this age were young and energetic. They wouldn't think too much. Shenting was about the same age as Xiangnan, but he was especially calm. New wife number 1. Hubby addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby addicted to pampering. The updates were the fastest. Chapter 4568. At this moment, Yi Xiangnan and Shun Ting were looking at each other silently. Little Yi Huan opened her big eyes wide and said, "Big brother, this is big brother Xiangnan." Yi Xiangnan lowered his head and asked, "How many big brothers do you have?" Little Yi Huan blinked and looked at him, unable to say a word. Baianin said to Wen Yuan in a low voice, "Yi Xiangnan is playing the lute to a cow." Wen Yuan thought so too. How old was Yi Huan? Although she always chased after him and said that she liked big brother Xiangnan, feelings were easy to change. Moreover, how old was Yi Huan? How could she understand these things? His son got serious and lost the moment he got serious. On the other hand, Shun Ting was still very calm. His aura was definitely not inferior to his son. Wen Yuan sighed in admiration. Xiangnan was probably going to suffer in love in the future. At this moment, after Yi Xiangnan asked, Yi Huan opened her eyes wide and looked puzzled. Then she said softly, "They're both big brothers." She thought for a while and said, "Big brother Xiangnan and big brother Shenting are different." After all, Yi Xiangnan was used to being arrogant. He smiled faintly and said, "Then which big brother do you like?" Little Yi Huan was in a dilemma. She looked at Shenting and big brother Xiangnan for a long time. She vaguely felt that the other one would be angry if she said either one. How difficult. The little fellow sighed secretly. Being too popular was also a kind of trouble. Then she cheered up and said with a smile, "They're both important." This answer was a pleasant surprise to Shenting, but it was a big blow to Yi Xiangnan. It had only been 2 days, and Shenting's status was already the same as his. He looked at little Yi Huan for a while, and then said softly, "You're not going to change it?" Yi Huan's heart was once again conflicted, but in the end, she still said honestly, "Brother Xiangnan, brother Shenting, is also very good." She couldn't hurt brother Shenting's heart for Xiangnan's sake. This was what Yi Huan thought. Yi Xiangnan looked at her quietly for a long time. Finally, he reached out and gently stroked her hair. "Got it." Then he let go of her and turned to look at Wen Yuan and Baianin. "Let's go." Wen Yuan knew that his son was angry, so he smiled and said, "Why don't we have a meal with your Uncle Qin and the others?" Yi Xiangnan revealed a strange smile. "I won't bother you anymore." Baianin couldn't help but roll her eyes. Stubborn Yi Xiangnan. Jealous Yi Xiangnan. However, Yi Xianan was already walking forward, looking rather proud. Wen Yuan had no choice but to appease Yi Huan. The little guy looked at Yi Xianan eagerly, then asked Wen Yuan, "Is big brother Xianan angry?" Wen Yuan smiled helplessly. "Don't worry about him. It's just a young master's temper." Yi Huan let out an "oh," then hung her head dejectedly. "I still want to let Xiangnan Gidge see if I look good in a little skirt." At this moment, Yi Xiangnan turned his head and looked at Shenting's face. Then he smiled faintly and said, "It's better for you to wear pants." This was a provocation to Shenting. The two boys, who were only in their teens, were already arguing over a little girl. However, it was Yi Xiangnan's one-sided argument. Shenting didn't say anything. He just reached out and gently rubbed Yi Huan's little head as a silent comfort. Yi Huan raised her little face and looked pitiful. There was a hint of moisture in her big eyes. Like new wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering. It was the fastest to update. Chapter 4569. Shenting couldn't bear to see her like this. He didn't know what he was thinking, but he lowered his head and kissed her on the forehead. Yi Huan raised her head and looked straight into Shenting's eyes. After a while, she turned to look at Yi Xiangnan. Yi Xiangnan had both hands in his pockets and looked at them quietly. There was no emotion in his eyes. Yi Huan's lips moved, but she didn't say anything. Yi Xiangnan turned and left. Wen Yuan had no choice but to follow him. Bai Anan walked over and reached out to stroke Yi Huan's head. She said softly, "Ignore that idiot." Shen Ting's gaze fell on Bai Anan. Bai Anan was about 12 or 13 years old and was already 165 centimeters tall. She was very tall, and she looked extremely calm. In just a few seconds, Shen Ting could tell that this was a girl who was very similar to him. They were too similar. The difference was that Bai Anan probably had too much, so she didn't have any desires. And in Shen Ting's heart, there was already a Yi Huan. While Shen Ting was looking at Bai Anan was also sizing him up. With just a few looks, she could tell that he was a ruthless character. In the future, there would be Yi Xiangnan crying. In the end, Bai Anan still left. As soon as she left, Yi Huan burst into tears. She cried so miserably. Big brother Xiangnan was angry at her. He was giving her a cold shoulder and ignoring her. The chubby baby cried especially miserably. She didn't care whether this was a shopping mall or not. Heartbroken, she just wanted to cry. Shen Ting was in a difficult position. He bent down to coax her, but the baby didn't care at all. She was sad and wanted to cry. Her cries were so loud that Yi Xiangnan, who had walked far away, could hear it. However, he only frowned and continued walking. Bai Anan was beside him. "Hey, the little one is crying. Are you really going to ignore her?" Yi Xiangnan's footsteps paused. He kicked his feet on the spot and said very slowly, "If she wants to cry, what can I do?" Bai Anan coughed lightly. She cried because Big Brother Xiangnan ignored her. In Yi Huan's heart, Big Brother Xiangnan is more important. As soon as she finished speaking, Yi Xiangnan's face flushed. He glared at Bai Anan fiercely, then slowly walked back to where he came from. While Yi Huan was still crying, Shen Ting had already picked her up and wiped her nose. That crying face of hers didn't have the slightest bit of Chen's elegance. Yi Xiangnan stared at her being carried by Shen Ting. His footsteps became slower and slower. For a moment, he wanted to leave, but Yi Huan saw him. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. He cursed in his heart. He didn't say anything. He took out a lollipop from his pocket and stuffed it into her hand. Then, he scolded her for being an idiot. Yi Huan was in a daze. While she was in a daze, Yi Xiangnan had already turned around and left. It was very cool. Yi Huan stopped crying, but she still sniffled. She looked very pitiful. After a long time, she asked Shen Ting softly, "Will Big Brother Xiangnan not want me anymore?" Shen Ting's heart ached, but he smiled. "He won't." Yi Huan was very depressed. "He said that I don't look good in a dress." "What does Yi Huan think?" Shen Ting asked her gently as he wiped the cat's face. Yi Huan was stunned for a while before she said proudly, "Of course I look good. If the baby didn't look good, who looked good?" Shen Ting smiled again. "That's it. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. My phone was the fastest to update." Chapter 4570. Shen Ting looked very handsome when he smiled. Yi Huan stared at him in a daze. After a long time, she swallowed her saliva and said, "Brother, you're so handsome." Shen Ting was speechless. After a while, he whispered, "Are you still going to buy a dress?" With Yi Huan's limited EQ, she thought for a long time and finally decided to buy a dress to please Brother Shen Ting. At most, she would just buy it and not wear it. Thus, she nodded her head vigorously, tears still hanging on her little face. Shen Ting helped her wipe them off and then carried her to try on the dress. Yi Huan was unhappy, so she pointed at a random dress and wanted this one. She didn't want to try it on. Shen Ting was very meticulous. He quickly understood and didn't say anything. He just swiped his card and took the bag downstairs. When they reached the Starbucks on the first floor, they found Qin Mo and Yi Huan. Qin Mo immediately saw Yi Huan's crying face and smiled. "Did you cry?" Shen Ting hesitated for a moment. Yi Huan had already jumped into her father's arms with a lollipop in her hand. "Brother Xiangnan is angry and doesn't want to talk to me anymore." Qin Mo was annoyed and amused at the same time. He looked at his little girl and murmured after a long time, "Our little girl broke up?" "No way," Yi Huan said as she took a deep breath and buried herself in her father's arms. Although her parents and brother Shen Ting were here, she still couldn't help thinking about Brother Xiangnan. Although Brother Shinting was also handsome, it was different. The little Yihuan already had different thoughts. Qin Mo comforted her for a long time and had a children's meal with the whole family. Only then did the little girl's mood improve. Throughout the night, Yihuan stuck to Qin Mo, including when they got off the car. Qin Mo also loved her. He carried her off the car and upstairs. Shinting sat in the back seat and didn't get off for a long time. After a few steps, Yihuan turned back and asked Shinting, "Why don't you go back?" Shinting snapped out of his trance and chuckled softly before getting out of the car. However, his hand lightly held a paper bag, holding it for a while before letting go. Yihuan looked on silently. She actually understood his feelings, but she didn't say anything. She chose to pretend that she didn't know about Shun Ting's disappointment. This was just a small matter. There would be many such things happening in the future. Shun Ting didn't need to be comforted by such things. Instead, it would hurt his self-esteem. Yihuan thought, "I can handle this child by myself." However, she still walked side by side with Shun Ting and patted his shoulder. "Sleep early. We'll take care of Yihuan tonight. She might sleep in our room." Shun Ting nodded. Yihuan added, "Don't stay up too late to read." "Thank you, Auntie," Shun Ting suddenly said, quite seriously. Yihuan smiled. "What are you thanking me for? We're family." She paused, then said, "No matter what." Shun Ting smiled. They went to the second floor together. After saying goodnight to Yihuan, he went to his room. When he got back, he didn't rush to read. Instead, he put down the paper bag in his hand and took out a little dress. It was Yihuan's dress. She was so sad that she completely forgot about it. She didn't pay attention when she picked it, and then forgot about it. Perhaps it was because of his position in her heart. Was the order really that important? He didn't know if he would lose, but he didn't want to give up. He might not be able to meet such a despicable person in the future. Even if his head was bleeding, he didn't want to give up. Like new wife number 1. Hubby addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby addicted to pampering. My phone was the fastest to update. Chapter 4571. While Shinting was feeling dejected, Qin Mo carefully placed the crying Yihuan on the big bed. He then carefully removed the little girl's coat and shoes and gently covered her with the blanket. As a father, his heart always softened when he saw his daughter sleeping soundly. He sat by the bed and looked at her for a long while. When Yihuan came in, she saw him like this. She lowered her voice and said, "Qin Mo." Qin Mo looked up at Yihuan and smiled. "What's wrong? You look like you're in deep trouble." Yihuan closed the door and leaned against it for a while. Qin Mo didn't say anything and just looked at her. After a long while, Yihuan finally walked over and leaned behind him. She rested her head on Qin Mo's shoulder and asked softly, "Is it too cruel to Shinting? That child is so good. Even if he's not in the Qin family, I believe he'll have a bright future." Qin He tilted his head and stared at her for a long while before his gaze returned to Yihuan. He didn't say anything for a long while. Yihuan couldn't wait any longer and urged, "Qin Mo." Qin Mo held her hand and said slowly, "Yes, if it doesn't enter the Qin family or King Entertainment, Shun Ting can do it himself. He can start his own company when he's 40. Maybe it'll be worth billions or even billions. But to reach the level of King Entertainment, it'll take at least 2 generations." Yihuan couldn't stand his argument and said in a low voice, "Qin Mo, it's not like that. You can't think of everything from a realistic perspective. Shinting doesn't think that way." Qin Mo laughed softly. "You like this kid a lot? You're speaking up for him so quickly?" Yihuan was rendered speechless for a moment. Qin Mo chuckled again. "You don't look convinced. Then let's go with your line of thinking. If Shun Ting isn't here for this, then he's here for Yihuan. Do you agree?" Yihuan remained silent. Qin Mo smiled. "If you don't object, I'll continue. Since it's for love, it's not a big deal to suffer a little, right? No one forced him. Everything is his own choice. If you don't give him this chance now, maybe he won't be willing." Qin Mo smiled. After he finished speaking, Yihuan covered her face and said, "Qin Mo, why does everything you say sound so reasonable? In fact, We all know how cruel the truth is. Chinamo looked at her. Are you in pain now? Unhappy? Ihuan was speechless again. After a while, he snorted and said, I'm going to take a shower. Chinamo laughed and patted her. You get angry when you can't win. Puppies are like that. Ihuan turned around and glared at him. I'm a puppy. I'll bite you to death when I get back. Chinamo laughed and said in a low voice, I'll be waiting for you. I'm just afraid you don't have the guts. Ihuan felt that it would be inappropriate to continue talking to him. Hence, she ignored him and went to the bathroom to take a shower. When she came out, Chinamo was no longer in the bedroom. Ihuan crawled over to Ihuan and lay down beside her. She kissed the little girl and thought that Chinamo must have gone to comfort Shinting. This child had only just arrived and had already run into Xiangnan. Even if he hadn't been dealt a heavy blow, he must have been feeling rather upset. Like new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. My phone was the fastest to update. Chapter 4572. Ihuan was also an experienced person and had tasted the pain of love. She also knew that the Qin family seemed to be. Shinting was just another Qin Mo or Yimuyun. However, his situation was worse than everyone else's, and there was no way he could compare to Yishangnan. Ihuan sighed. It was really difficult for that child. She waited for Qin Mo and deliberately stayed awake. Sure enough, Qin Mo came back within half an hour. The door opened and closed. Ihuan asked, How is he? Reading. Qin Mo smiled faintly as he walked over and sat beside Ihuan. Ihuan looked at him, and Qin Mo chuckled. I tested him on his homework. It's nothing like the comfort you're talking about. Qin Mo's eyes were glued to Qin Mo's chest. Ihuan nodded and looked at him. Qin Mo smiled and did not say anything else. He kissed her and said, I'm going to take a shower. Ihuan watched him leave. After a while, she heard Ihuan talking in her sleep, calling Xiangnan brother. Ihuan smiled. She felt helpless and a little sad for Shinting. However, just like what Qin Mo said, Shinting could only adjust everything himself. No one else could help him. Just like that, everyone spent the night with their own thoughts. Shinting did not give the dress to Ihuan, and Ihuan did not mention it either. Perhaps she had forgotten about it. Shinting hung up the dress in his wardrobe for many years. However, Ihuan did not know about it. Early in the morning, Shinting went to the changing room after washing up. He could not help but glance at the dress again. After looking at it, he was silent for a long time before he took out a set of clothes to change into. When he went downstairs, he was surprised to see only Qin Mo and Ihuan sitting at the dining table. Ihuan was not there. Good morning, Uncle and Auntie. Shinting sat at the dining table. Is Ihuan awake yet? Qin Mo told the truth. The car of the Yi family came to pick her up early in the morning and said that she would play for 2 days. When Qin Mo said this, he also felt that it was unfair to Shinting. However, this deal was unfair from the beginning. Moreover, Shinting wouldn't give up just because of this small matter. If he gave up, he wouldn't be Shinting, and that wouldn't be love. Although Qin Mo felt a little apologetic, he still told the truth. Ihuan, who was standing at the side, also felt uncomfortable. She secretly kicked Qin Mo onto the table. Qin Mo turned his head and looked at Ihuan. Why did you kick me? Ihuan gritted his teeth and said, I didn't kick you. In that case, it must be a puppy, Qin Mo concluded, which infuriated Ihuan. She glared at him and said, Qin Mo. Qin Mo smiled and didn't care if his little wife would be angry. He just said to Shinting in a low voice, I'm going to the company today. I remember that you have a few more days before school starts, right? Shinting nodded. Qin Mo quickly said, Come with me to the company later. Shinting nodded again. Ihuan asked softly, How's the premiere? Qin Mo drank half a glass of milk and said honestly, it's not good. There are too few showtimes. If we want to counterattack, we can only rely on word of mouth. But we have to solve the problem of being locked out first. We'll talk about it at the company later. Ihuan looked at him, wanting to say something, but hesitating. But Qin Mo knew what she was thinking. He said in a low voice, I know what you mean. A bet for her to be happy was not a bad thing. For King Entertainment, it wouldn't change the foundation. At most, it would make AI Jia jump a few times. Like new wife number 1. Husband, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, I'm addicted to pampering. Playbar updates the fastest. Chapter 4573. No matter how despicable AI Jia was in the business world, he didn't care. But when it came to the Qin family, He Huan and his parents, he would never let her get away with it. Even if she used to be someone from the land of Qin. Qin Mo's expression darkened at this thought. He Huan turned to him and said in a low voice, Qin Mo, what's wrong? Qin Mo shook his head. Nothing. He put down the cup in his hand. I'll wait for you in the car. With that, he walked out. He Huan looked at his back and said to Shen Ting, don't you think your uncle is a little weird? Shen Ting nodded matter-of-factly. He does look a little different. He Huan wanted to make him talk more. So she leaned over and asked, what do you think is different? Shen Ting looked a little speechless. And he should know better. He Huan thought, can't we talk properly? Kids these days are all so bad. Shen Ting felt very innocent. He couldn't answer this kind of question. In the end, they got into the car together and went to King Entertainment. Qin Mo had a meeting. He Huan didn't attend, but Shen Ting did. Because of this, He Huan had a different opinion of Qin Mo. Because of his own ability, Shen Ting could only attend such a core meeting at the age of 26. And now, Shen Ting was only 13. He Huan thought that Qin Mo was really grooming Shen Ting as his successor. In her heart, she seemed to be able to understand Qin Mo. She could understand his pain and difficulties. Perhaps Shen Ting really had to show up. Otherwise, He Huan would be the one working hard in the meeting at the age of 13. Then, He Huan felt that she was a little selfish. She couldn't bear to leave He Huan, but she felt that Qin Mo was grooming Shen Ting. Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, the 2-hour meeting came to an end. Qin Mo and Shen Ting walked in as they talked, followed by Secretary He. He Huan was a little surprised because in the past, Qin Mo would directly delegate matters to Secretary He. It was not like now, where he had to discuss with Shen Ting. Secretary He was also waiting behind him in a good mood. She saw that He Huan was a little stunned, so she smiled and secretly said, Shen Ting is very good. He doesn't look like a 13-year-old at all. President Qin really has sharp eyes. Where did he find such a treasure? He Huan felt a sense of pride in his heart. He smiled faintly and said, he's the child of a friend of Qin Mo's. Although she said that, how could Secretary He not understand? Why would a friend's child be brought to King Entertainment and attend such a meeting? She bet a pack of spicy sticks that President Qin was grooming Shen Ting as a successor. However, knowing was one thing, but Secretary He still did not say anything. There was a saying called praising someone to death. Before everything was settled, it was better not to say anything. It was better for the child. After the two women finished talking, Qin Mo was on the phone. After about 10 minutes, he hung up and said calmly, 214 can't be changed, but from 215 onwards, he looked at Secretary He. Start injecting capital. Make the box office higher than searching for Tang Dynasty. Secretary He was a little worried. Can we do that? What if the volume is a little too big? Qin Mo frowned. If we can't even beat a lousy film, then don't do it. Lousy film? He Huan stuck out her tongue. She really admired Qin Mo. No one had ever said that Ijia was a lousy film. Like new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. Hit bar was the fastest to update. Chapter 4574. However, He Huan had to admit that she was secretly pleased with what Qin Mo had said. But even so, she couldn't say that it was a lousy film. Otherwise, it would be a slap in the face if she couldn't beat it. She had heard that both her and AI Jia's films had been nominated for the Oscars next month. Actually, He Huan didn't think much of it. It was just that her opponent was AI Jia, so He Huan couldn't help but feel a little more concerned. But she tried her best to remain calm. She still wanted to prove herself with her ability. Moreover, she didn't want to trouble Qin Mo with such things. Qin Mo didn't just manage King Entertainment. She knew that he was very busy. After Qin Mo finished speaking, Not only Juan, but even Secretary he was stunned. Since when had President Qin become so generous? In the past, President Qin had hated things like manipulating votes. It was useless to say that it was a lousy film. But now, in order to curry favor with his wife, he wanted to manipulate votes while saying that the other party's film was lousy. Was he being reasonable? He was being completely unreasonable. Secretary, he endured the pain and smiled. All right, President Qin, we'll definitely make it. This maneuver made Juan, who was standing at the side, feel ashamed. Was she going to lose for sure? She was thinking about manipulating votes? Qin seemed to have read her mind. He said, if you don't, you'll definitely lose. It would only be for 2 or 3 days. After that, the reputation of the film would turn the tables and beat the other lousy films. This time, AIG's film was indeed a lousy film. The grand scenes were all a bluff. There was no way it could stabilize later on. But if Twin didn't build momentum, an artistic film would still lose to a lousy film. There was no other way. This was how the market was. As Qin made these arrangements, he took care of some other matters. Juan and Shun Ting chatted casually for a while. But Qin called Shun Ting over after a while. Juan thought that Qin would only be busy at King Entertainment for half a day. She didn't expect that he would bring her and Shun Ting to a newly built building in the prime area of B City in the afternoon. A Moore building. It was 68 stories high, and it was an asset under Qin name. It mainly focused on finance, and there was not only one company, but many companies managed by various elite teams. Qin only attended a briefing once a week, but it was tiring enough. Juan was resting in the lounge attached to the office. Occasionally, she could hear Qin voice and Shun Ting's for the entire afternoon. Both Qin and Shun Ting were busy. Juan couldn't help but say, Qin Shun Ting is only 13 years old. Before Shun Ting could say anything, Qin said, when I was 13, it was common for me to sleep less than 4 hours a day. Juan was a little angry. Are you going to let Shun Ting sleep for less than 4 hours? Qin calmed down a little and lowered his voice. I didn't say that. Be a good boy. I'll try not to let him work so hard. However, he quickly said meaningfully, Juan, the price you pay is proportional to the price you get. I don't think Xianan will have it easy either. You know this as well. So you really have to consider shielding her, don't you? Juan was really a little unhappy with what he said. She bit her lip and said softly after a long time, You're right. She's angry again. Qin laughed. She gets angry so easily. She's even more childish than Juan. Shun Ting, do you want to coax your Annie? Like new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. My phone was the fastest to update. Chapter 4575. Finally, the adults were done flirting with each other. Shun Ting's face was no longer as hot as before. It wasn't until they got into the car that he calmed down, but he still felt a little uncomfortable. Looking at the people in front of him, Qin was discussing the movie with Juan as he drove. He was really going to discuss it with Juan now. After all, Juan was the one who made the movie, even though he did a lot of post-production work. Qin held the steering wheel and looked at the car in front of him. He said calmly, The negative news about AI Meng has decreased a lot recently. Juan thought of the best actress, so she asked softly, What about the negative news about her? But AI Meng is different. She needs a strong opportunity. With the success of Twin, she needs a positive image. With a lot of people supporting her and helping her clear her name, the public will be able to accept that her dark history was framed and not something she did on her own accord. Do you understand? Qin voice was husky and charming. Didn't I say that she would appear at the premiere and announce that she got married a long time ago? She will be able to make a comeback easily, but AI Meng is different. She needs a strong opportunity. Juan understood and was grateful. She didn't have anything to do with AI Meng, but she felt sorry for Rongyu. Rongyu's health wasn't good, and he couldn't take a blow. She also had limited abilities. Only Qin could protect AI Meng. However, Hee-Huan suddenly felt a little upset. She even forgot about Shun-Ting in the back seat and said in a low voice, "Chinamo, I'm a little jealous." As she said that, she hugged his arm gently and even put her head on his shoulder. President Qin was shocked by his wife's sudden coquettishness. He glanced at the rearview mirror quietly with a hint of warning in his eyes. Shun-Ting immediately turned his face away. "Don't listen to indecent things. Don't look at indecent things. Don't speak indecent things." Chinamo was satisfied. This child was really sensible. He then rubbed Hee-Huan's head and said hoarsely, "What's wrong? Why are you suddenly acting coquettishly?" At this moment, Hee-Huan was completely immersed in the feelings of a young girl. When she spoke, her voice was like that of a little lamb, soft, cute, and adorable. She said in a low voice, "I'm just angry that you're so nice to her. In the past, you even arranged roles for her and even gave her a house and a car." Finally, the spoiled little woman said angrily, "You're practically treating her like a concubine." Chinamo was speechless. He thought about it as he drove. Finally, he nodded in agreement. "Yes, yes, yes. You're right." Hee-Huan glared at him, looking as if he was about to die of anger. Chinmo's voice carried a hint of a smile. "Yes, in the end, my concubine married your first love. Isn't that fair? Are you feeling better now, Mrs. Qin?" Hee-Huan was speechless. After a long while, she whispered, "My first love is not Rongyu." Chinmo's heart was sour, sad, and a little sweet. His voice changed to a gentle tone, as if he was talking to his lover. "Then who is it? Can you tell me?" Hee-Huan was about to speak when an uncomfortable cough came from the back seat. It was Shun-Ting. He couldn't stand it anymore. These two adults were too shameless. Hee-Huan blushed and felt a little hot. She glared at Chin-Mo, sat up straight, and ignored him. Like new wife number one, hubby addicted to spoiling. New wife number one, hubby addicted to spoiling. My phone is the fastest to update. Chapter 4577. Just as Hee-Huan was about to speak, an uncomfortable cough came from the back seat. It was Shun-Ting. He couldn't stand it anymore. These two adults were too shameless. Hee-Huan blushed and felt a little hot. She glared at Chin-Mo and sat up straight, ignoring him. Chin-Mo was in a particularly good mood. Only now did he find the time to talk to Shun-Ting, who was sitting in the back seat. "See, women are all unreasonable. It was clearly your Annie who started to act like a spoiled child and interrogate her, but now she's shrinking back. It seems like it's my fault. Women are like this. You have to be careful in the future." Shun-Ting coughed violently again. He couldn't stand it anymore. In the world of adults, apart from love, was everything so coquettish? It was full of tricks, full of things that he didn't know at his age. Shun-Ting could only pretend that he didn't know. He was stupid. He didn't expect Chin-Mo to be so open in front of him. After all, it was a private matter between husband and wife, and he was an outsider. Shun-Ting was also a very smart person. He immediately understood why Chin-Mo did not avoid him. It was because Chin-Mo really regarded him as his son, so he did not avoid him. Of course, he thought that if it was a quarrel, Chin-Mo wouldn't be in front of him. Adults always showed their best side to their children. After Shun-Ting figured it out, he didn't say anything else. He just smiled. Chin-Mo said a lot more, but Hee-Huan ignored him. He was too bad. When the car arrived at the villa, Chin-Mo stopped and signaled for Shun-Ting to get out. "I'll come over after talking to your aunt. You can go back and watch TV. Don't read too much." Shun-Ting understood in his heart that it was the world of adults again. His face became thin and hot again. He didn't want to watch anymore and immediately jumped out of the car. Chin-Mo waited until Shun-Ting was far away before unfastening his seatbelt. He rubbed his chin and said to Hee-Huan, "That child seems very uncomfortable." Hee-Huan also unfastened her seatbelt. "I want to get out." Just as she was about to get out, Chin-Mo held her hand. "Wait, I still have something to say to you." Hee-Huan was speechless. "If you have something to say it when you're sleeping." Chin-Mo ignored her and said, "Did you just say that I have a mistress?" Mrs. Qin immediately sensed danger. The more casual Chin-Mo sounded, the more dangerous it was. She reached out and said in a low voice, "It's my fault. I'm sorry, Mr. Chin. Please be magnanimous. Chin Mo smiled and reached out to touch her face. You're quite smart. You know how to please me now. The look in He Huan's eyes was indescribable, but she did not dare to do anything. Chin Mo knew when to stop. He smiled and said, All right, I'll let you go. He Huan wanted to scold him, but he had already gotten out of the car. The way he opened the car door and got out of the car was extremely elegant and dignified. He Huan couldn't help but blush when she saw that. She was a little embarrassed. Chin Mo casually turned around and looked at her. He smiled and said, What are you looking at? You're so engrossed that you're in a daze. He Huan came back to her senses and jogged over. She hugged his arm and leaned against him, whispering, My first love is Mr. Chin. Chin Mo smiled. Mr. Chin, do you know which year it was? He Huan pursed her lips and murmured after a long time. The year of my period. The year you fed me red beans. The year you handed me your jacket. New wife number 1. Honey, addicted to spoiling. New wife number 1. Hubby, I'm addicted to pampering. My phone is the fastest to update. Chapter 4578. After she said that, Chin Mo smiled. It was warm to walk with her in the dark, towards a place where there was light. Chin Mo put her down and clasped her hand with his fingers. His voice was gentler than the night. I know. He Huan's little face blushed slightly, and then she said a little awkwardly, You don't know. Chin Mo just smiled and didn't say anything else. He thought he understood He Huan's feelings when she was in her teens. It wasn't that she didn't like him back then, but she liked him so much that she was afraid. After all, he pampered her back then, but he was also strict. Chin Mo held her hand and said with a smile, I will be more lenient with you in the future. He Huan's face was slightly hot, and she looked at him strangely after a while. She actually understood in her heart. After so many years, they were finally together. Yes, they were in love. He Huan felt that it was great. Under this kind of feeling, the short romance with Rong Yu seemed so insignificant, as if it had happened in her previous life. Or maybe it had never happened at all. The person she liked had always been Chin Mo. She felt sweet in her heart. When they arrived at the villa, Chin Mo asked her to watch TV with Shun Ting while he cooked. The servants in the house also held their breaths and watched. Chin Mo was uncomfortable. He looked up and smiled. Why are you all looking at me? Go do what you have to do. Only then did they leave. In the living room, He Huan took off her coat and walked to the sofa. Shun Ting sat upright. The good-looking young man had a reserved look, and he didn't feel relaxed even when watching TV. He Huan suddenly realized that he looked a lot like the young Chin Mo. The reason why Chin Mo chose Shun Ting was probably because of this, because they were very similar. He Huan further confirmed that Chin Mo liked Shun Ting from the bottom of his heart, and it wasn't just because of He Huan. As she thought of this, she felt a little closer to Shun Ting. She felt that he could be considered her child. This child was always a little restrained, so she didn't say much and just sat side by side with him. Shun Ting's face was slightly red, but he still moved closer to her. Although they were 20 years apart in age, Shun Ting was very tall, and He Huan was very young. Therefore, they didn't look like mother and son at all, but more like brother and sister. Perhaps it was He Huan's imagination, but she felt that Shun Ting looked like a native of the Chin family. This was probably fate. After sitting with He Huan for a while, Shun Ting finally felt that it was inappropriate for him to let Chin Mo cook for him. So he told He Huan and ran to the kitchen. Chin Mo heard his footsteps and knew someone was coming, but he didn't expect it to be Shun Ting. Therefore, after Shun Ting gently and intimately poked his arm, Mr. Chin stretched out his hand and pulled Shun Ting into his arms. Just as he was about to kiss her, he suddenly found that the person in his arms was not He Huan, but Shun Ting. Chin Mo was also shocked. The atmosphere was very strange. After a while, he remembered to put Shun Ting down and coughed lightly. It's you. Shun Ting was also young, so he didn't know that there were such things between adults. He blushed and wanted to say something, but he really couldn't say anything. In the end, he actually ran away. Chin Mo was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. He knew that he was embarrassed, so he shook his head and smiled. Like new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to spoiling. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to spoiling. My phone is the fastest to update. Chapter 4579. Chinamo was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. He knew that he was embarrassed, so he shook his head and smiled. Even he was shocked, not to mention Shinting. Chinamo calmed down for a while before he recovered and continued cooking. When Shinting returned to the living room, his face was a little red. Yihuan noticed it too and asked curiously, "Why is your face red?" Shinting was even more embarrassed. He touched his face with his fingers. "Oh, really?" Yihuan reached out and touched his face. "It's still hot." Shinting, for the first time, he blushed like a little princess. Living with Uncle and Annie was too exciting. It was almost 9 o'clock when Chinamo finished cooking. Luckily, Yihuan and Shinting had eaten something to replenish their energy. Just as they were about to start eating, Chinmo's phone rang. He picked up the phone with a smile because it was Yihuan's phone. However, his expression changed as soon as he picked up. Yihuan noticed the change in his expression and couldn't help but feel nervous. She wanted to ask, but she didn't dare, because Chinmo rarely had such an expression. At that moment, Chinmo had already put down his phone. He stared at Yihuan for a while and said in a low voice, "Yihuan fell and lost a lot of blood. Let's go to the hospital now." Then, his gaze fell on Shinting's face. Shinting seemed to have guessed something. He pursed his lips and said, "I'll go with you." Chinmo nodded. "Take your coat. I'll wait for you in the car." Although he said that, he only wore a sweater and went out. It was obvious that it was serious. When Yihuan and Shinting got in the car together, Chinmo started the car without waiting for them to fasten their seatbelts. On the way, Yihuan was very anxious, but she didn't ask because she knew that Chinmo was in a bad mood. He still had to drive, and he had many things to think about. At that moment, Shinting held her hand. He didn't say anything, but the youth's hand was a little warm. Yihuan pursed her lips and held Shinting's hand. What happened next was a little chaotic. When they arrived at the hospital, Yihuan was lying on the bed in the VIP ward. Her face was pale. One of her pants had been cut in half, revealing a large wound on her knee. Although it was bandaged, blood was still seeping out of the wound. This was Yihuan's first time seeing Yihuan lose blood, and her heart ached. She grabbed Chinmo's arm. "Let me give her a blood transfusion." Chinmo tilted his head. In fact, Yihuan's body wasn't very well. She had just recovered a little, so it wasn't wise to draw blood now. However, he knew that Yihuan really needed blood now. Therefore, even though he knew it wasn't good for Yihuan, he still nodded. 200, he said to the nurse, his voice hoarse as he said the time. Drawing Yihuan's blood was like stabbing him in the heart. It was a dull pain. The nurse frowned. "The patient needs at least 600, and the hospital doesn't have such a scarce amount." Before Chinmo could say anything, Shinting said, "Draw mine." The nurse looked at him. He's not an adult yet, so he doesn't agree with blood drawing. But right after she said that, Chinmo said, "He's my son, draw his." Shinting had an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had a feeling that Chinmo was insistent on drawing his blood for another reason. Although it was scarce, it wasn't impossible. 500 was indeed too much for Shinting. He was a little tired from losing so much blood, and he hadn't eaten at night. After seeing that Yihuan was getting better, he couldn't take it anymore and went to the ward next door to lie down. Like new wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, addicted to pampering. Mobile phone updates are the fastest. Chapter 4580. To Shinting, 500 was indeed too much. The massive blood loss made him a little tired, and he hadn't eaten at night. When he saw that Yihuan was getting better, he couldn't take it anymore and went to the ward next door to lie down. Yihuan was the same. 200 was almost enough to kill her. She didn't know how long it would take for her to recuperate again. Chinmo went to visit them and was relieved to know that they were fine. He held Yihuan's hand and said softly, "Rest for a while. When you're better, I'll get the nurse to send some digestible food over. Watch Shinting and eat some together. Also, don't let him visit Yihuan, at least tomorrow. Otherwise, he won't be able to rest well. Although Huan was weak, she still nodded. Qin Mo said a few more words in a low voice. Then, he went to look at Shunting and reached out to touch his face. After a few seconds, he went to Huan's ward. After 700 liters of blood was transfused, Huan's complexion was much better. However, she was still half awake and was still calling Xiangnan Big Brother. Yi Xiangnan, Yi Mubai, and Wen Yuan were all there. Regarding this accident, Yi Mubai and Wen Yuan were a little apologetic. However, they didn't say much as an apology would hurt their relationship. Yi Xiangnan sat quietly on the sofa beside the bed and stared at Huan's little face. He was actually a little scared. He couldn't imagine what would have happened to Huan if there was no blood. She had lost a lot of blood, so much that it couldn't be stopped. When he carried her into the car, Huan's little body was twitching. At that time, Yi Xiangnan's heart was shattered. Although she was clearly much better now, he still felt a little fearful and uneasy. He felt that she was very fragile and lying there like a bubble. He was even a little jealous of Shunting. He was jealous that his blood could save Huan while he could only sit there and wait. This kind of jealousy made Yi Xianan understand what he was thinking. In his heart, there was a little fellow who looked like a doll, but her hair was cut so badly that it looked like it had been chewed by a dog. But she was still very pretty, prettier than any little girl he had ever seen. Yi Xiangnan thought that he wanted her to be his wife. However, he had Shunting now. There was a slight pain in his eyes as he reached out to hold Huan's hand. He was young and had an extraordinary background. However, this was the first time that Qin Mo's arrangements had caused him to suffer a setback. He was not completely convinced, so he vented his anger on Huan. But how old was Huan? Other than following behind him and calling him Brother Xiangnan, what else did she know? She didn't know anything. But it was precisely because she didn't understand that he was even more worried. That was why he was even more uneasy and worried about gains and losses. It was because he wasn't the only outstanding candidate. Shunting was also outstanding and had precious blood. As Yi Xiangnan was thinking about it, the little hand in his hand moved. He quickly looked over. Huan woke up and called out to him with tired eyes, "Big Brother Xiangnan." These 4 words were very light, with some fear and grievance. But it was enough to make Yi Xiangnan want to cry. He held her hand tightly and said in a low voice, "Are you better?" Huan buried her face in the pillow and said, "Big Brother Xiangnan, can you call me baby?" She called him Big Brother Shunting once, and she felt that it was very nice. She felt like a little princess when she heard it. Yi Xiangnan was in a daze for a moment, and then he called out in a low voice. Like new wife number 1. Husband addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Husband addicted to pampering. The updates are the fastest. Chapter 4581. Yi Xiangnan was in a daze for a moment, and then he called out in a low voice. After that, he wanted to talk to her, but Huan closed her eyes and fell asleep again. She actually didn't hear that baby. Yi Xiangnan was a little disappointed. After a long time, he was sure that she was really asleep. He was a little unwilling, but more than that, he just sat there all the time. After midnight, Qin Mo still let him go to sleep. At first, Yi Xiangnan was reluctant, but Qin Mo insisted because there was no need for one more person to watch over. Moreover, Huan was fine. In the end, Yi Mubai took his son away, and he planned to come back in the morning. Only Qin Mo and a nurse were left in the ward. At 1 o'clock in the night, the nurse finished her work and said respectfully, "Mr. Qin, the child is fine. The doctor will come for a ward round tomorrow morning. You should rest early too." Qin Mo nodded and watched as the nurse went out and closed the door. But everyone was asleep. As a father, how could he fall asleep? Especially since Huan had lost so much blood today. Just thinking about it made him feel a little scared. Qin Mo didn't want to sleep, so he kept watching over her. At about 2 o'clock in the night, the ward door was pushed open. Qin Mo turned his head and saw Shunting come in. Obviously, because he was the only one in the ward, Shunting seemed to heave a sigh of relief. He walked over and asked in a low voice, "How is she?" Qin Mo rubbed his sore eyes. "She should be fine. She's asleep, and After eating something tomorrow, she should be alive and kicking again. Shunting nodded and walked over to sit by the bed. He had drawn 500 blood, but now he had to get close to her. God knew that he didn't need to rest. He just wanted to be with this little person. Even if he couldn't help, he was satisfied just looking at her. Qin Mo looked at Shunting, and he sighed in his heart. He also felt a little sorry for him. Shunting might face a lot of setbacks in his relationships in the future. Now, he wondered if he was wrong to arrange for Shunting when Yihuan liked Xiangnan, and Xiangnan obviously liked Yihuan. This was indeed torture and pain for Shunting. It was also unfair. For the first time, Qin Mo doubted himself. Yihuan had protested many times before, but he didn't think so. Now that he saw Shunting's sad expression, he felt that he was wrong. How could he let someone else suffer the pain he had suffered once again? Qin Mo's heart was racing, but he didn't show it on his face. Coincidentally, Yihuan came over at this moment. Her face was as pale as Shunting's. Qin Mo was a little surprised and immediately asked in a low voice, "Why are you here?" After a pause, he asked, "Have you eaten with Shunting?" Yihuan shook her head and walked over to Shunting. Shunting said in a low voice, "She's fine." Yihuan sat down and reached out to touch Yihuan's little face. She stared at her for a long time. At this time, Qin Mo made a call and asked someone to send some food over. He didn't care about it at first, but now he decided to eat with them. The food was sent over. There was food and nourishing soup. Yihuan didn't have an appetite, but she was forced to eat some by Qin Mo. Her body was really weak. So after eating, Qin Mo fed her half a sleeping pill and carried her to the ward next door to let her rest. Like new wife number 1. "Hubby, I'm addicted to spoiling." New wife number 1. "Hubby, I'm addicted to spoiling." My phone was the fastest to update. Chapter 4582. After the meal, Qin Mo fed her half a sleeping pill and carried her to the ward next door so that she could have a good rest. When he came back, he still had a headache because there was still one that refused to leave. Qin Mo walked over and patted him on the shoulder. He said in a low voice, "I'll be fine. You go with your auntie. She took sleeping pills, and I don't feel at ease leaving her there alone." Of course, it was just an excuse. He just didn't want Shunting to work too hard. After all, he had just drawn so much blood. In fact, Qin Mo did have other ways. Shunting wasn't the only one who had blood, but he wanted Shunting to remember this day and this painful moment. Because love was often painful before it was obtained. It was just like how he felt for Yihuan. Qin Mo wanted to say something, but today wasn't the time. Maybe he could talk to Shunting tomorrow or the day after. After he said that, Shunting replied softly, "I want to stay with her." Qin Mo thought for a while and agreed. "If you can't take it, go to sleep. You can't force yourself, understand?" Shunting nodded. Qin Mo didn't force him. He went to see Yihuan for a while and then came back. Shunting stubbornly stayed with Yihuan, as if he was holding on to that tiny bit of hope. Even he knew that it was very slim. He still stayed with her and waited stubbornly. Many years later, Shunting would sit alone in the CEO's office and think about whether his choice was right or wrong. No matter what he thought later, at this moment, he truly loved this little girl. Late at night, Shunting couldn't bear to close his eyes. He had waited so long for this opportunity. He could only stay by Yi Xiannan's side when she was not around. Just like the relationship between the three of them, Shunting was just a substitute. He didn't feel so bad in the past, but when Yihuan was lying here with someone else by her side, he felt really bad. Shunting had to suppress his discomfort, or he would lose his composure. A 13-year-old boy would always have his own pride. Shunting stayed by her side until around 4 o'clock in the evening. When even Qin Mo couldn't take a nap anymore, Yihuan woke up and opened her eyes. Under the warm light, a familiar face was placed on the edge of her pillow. Yihuan subconsciously called out, "Brother Xiangnan." Shunting's heart ached. Even when she was half awake, she was still thinking about Yi Xiangnan. He was upset, but he didn't show it on his face. He didn't want to disappoint her, so he was willing to let her misunderstand. Shunting nodded and reached out to gently touch her forehead. "Baby, do you want to eat something?" Little Yihuan's face was white, but her eyes were especially bright, just like a newborn chick, fresh, tender, and cute. She murmured, "Gidge, call me Bao Bao." Shun Ting's heart ached again, but his voice was extremely gentle as he said, "From now on, Big Brother will call you like this, okay?" The little girl nodded obediently. Actually, Shun Ting was already very tired, but because she was awake, he suddenly became energetic. He said in a low voice, "I'll feed you some red bean soup, okay?" It was originally for He Huan, but He Huan didn't like it, so he didn't touch it and kept it in the thermos. At this time, he could give some to Yi Huan. After he said that, little Yi Huan's face was full of horror, like new wife number one, hubby addicted to spoiling. New wife number one, hubby addicted to spoiling. Playbar updates the fastest. Chapter 4583. Just like Yi Huan didn't like to eat it. She sat at the head of the bed and stared at Shun Ting with a pained expression. "I don't want to eat this." Shun Ting was stunned for a moment before he understood. She had inherited He Huan's preferences. However, even though she didn't like it, Shun Ting still coaxed her. After a long time, Yi Huan bit her lips and gave in. Moreover, she didn't treat him as Yi Xiangnan anymore. She naturally called him Brother Shun Ting. Shun Ting said in a low voice, "Eat some. Be good." Yi Huan waited obediently for him to feed her. Shun Ting smiled, but there was some bitterness in his smile. This was something that little Yi Huan couldn't understand. Yi Huan's attention was focused on the bitterness in her mouth. Just like Yi Huan, she felt that it was especially bitter. It was as bitter as if her life was being taken away. However, since it was Big Brother Shun Ting who fed her, she still drank it obediently. Big Brother Shun Ting looked very worried. Yi Huan looked at him as she drank the red beans mouthful by mouthful. Because it was hot, even though it tasted bad, it was really comfortable in her stomach. Although Yi Huan had replenished the blood she had lost, her body was still very weak. She leaned against the pillow lightly and opened her eyes wide. "Brother, can you tell me a story?" She called him brother again. Shun Ting didn't care anymore. He was tired and sleepy, but he wanted to accompany her. Thus, he rested his head on the side of her pillow and told her a story softly. What Yi Huan didn't know was that Shun Ting had bought a thick book of fairy tales and finished them in one night. Thus, he told a few stories in a row, some of which Yi Huan had never heard before. Her eyes were wide open, and her palm-sized face was full of admiration. "Brother, you're amazing." Even though it was a very simple sentence, Shun Ting's heart felt warm and indescribable. He raised his head slightly and looked at Yi Huan. Yi Huan also looked at him, not knowing what she had done wrong. After a long time, Shun Ting finally said in a low voice, "I hope that when you grow up, you can always say this to me." Because of what she said, Shun Ting used all his strength to become the CEO of King Group at the age of 28, not just King Entertainment. At that time, Qin Mo had almost retired to the second tier, and the entire company was handed over to Shun Ting. Later, when Yi Huan was 24 years old, which was Shun Ting's 30, Yi Huan took over King Group, but Shun Ting still held the power. At that time, it was not impossible for him to fight for the throne. However, Shun Ting had always been the CEO, the man standing in front of Qin Yi Huan. But at this moment, it was the time when the two of them were innocent. However, the male and female leads were Qin Yi Huan and Yi Xiangnan. Not him, Shun Ting. He was willing to play a supporting role and enjoy this stolen moment. This quiet, beautiful, and painful moment finally ended because of Yi Huan's exhaustion. The little girl yawned and said in a low voice, "I want to sleep, brother." As soon as she said that, her eyes closed, and her little face fell on the pillow. She actually fell asleep just like that. Shun Ting didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he also felt a little heartache. Actually, he was also extremely tired, but he had been holding on. Now that she was asleep, it was also a kind of relief for him, but in his heart, he still felt a little reluctant. Like new wife number one, hubby, addicted to pampering. New wife number one, hubby, addicted to pampering. Playbar updates the fastest. Chapter 4584. Now that she was asleep, it was a form of relief for him. But in his heart, he couldn't bear to let her go. The young man endured it for a long time, but he still couldn't help but reach out a finger to touch her face. Ihuan's long eyelashes fluttered, and she murmured. Although it was blurry, Shanting could hear it clearly. It was Big Brother Xiangnan. His heart ached, and there was a great sense of confusion, but this feeling only lasted for about a minute. He smiled slightly and gently touched her short hair. Although it was short, it was surprisingly soft, just like Ihuan. It was especially soft and cute. Before Shanting could retract his hand, Qin Mo's voice sounded behind him. She's asleep? Shanting was a little embarrassed. After all, he had touched her. He lowered his head and hummed in acknowledgement. Qin Mo guessed that he was embarrassed and smiled. Go and sleep for a while. I'll wake you up later. Shanting nodded and agreed. He went to the ward next door. Exhausted, he couldn't sleep for the whole night. On this night, Ihuan had a strange and dazzling dream. When she woke up, she forgot everything that happened last night. She forgot that Shanting had fed her, and she forgot that Shanting had told her many stories. She forgot that it was Shanting who had spent this dark night with her. Because when she woke up in the morning, Yi Xiangnan's handsome face was right next to her pillow. Big Brother Xiangnan. Ihuan's voice was soft, and there was a hint of surprise in it. Did you spend the whole night with me? Before Yi Xiangnan could say anything, Ihuan said sweetly, I missed you so much, Big Brother Xiangnan. The little person became spoiled because she was hurt. Usually, Yi Xiangnan still had the temperament of a rich young master, and he always felt a little distant. But today, Ihuan didn't care. The sick person was the most important. Her little body no longer felt uncomfortable. She flew into Yi Xiangnan's arms and acted like a spoiled child. Yi Xiangnan hugged him and felt that the little guy in his arms had a smell of medicine, as well as a special milky scent that children had. This smell was indescribably comfortable and at ease. Thus, he forgot about the matter that he originally wanted to deny. She silently acknowledged the fact that he had accompanied her for the entire night. As they hugged, Shanting stood quietly at the door, his good-looking face expressionless. He wasn't angry, nor was he disappointed. It was just indifferent, as if he had already thought of what would happen. Ihuan watched from the side and patted his shoulder lightly. You can tell her. Shanting's gaze was still on Ihuan and Yi Xiangnan. After a while, he said softly, Auntie, don't say anything. I don't want to change her mind because of something else. He liked Ihuan, but he wanted her to be happy. It wasn't because of how much blood Shanting had drawn for her. If a relationship had to be conditional, it would be an insult to love. Ihuan felt a little sorry for Shanting. She wanted to say something, but Shanting said in a low voice, I'm going to ask the doctor about something. After saying that, he left. And Ihuan could only sigh. Qin Mo was also there. In fact, such an outcome was expected. In fact, this was also fair to Yi Xiangnan because Ihuan lived with Shanting every day. When Shanting returned from abroad, Ihuan would be in puberty, and Yi Xiangnan would probably be busy with the business of Stars Entertainment every day. New wife number 1. Husband, I'm addicted to spoiling. New wife number 1. Husband, I'm addicted to spoiling. The updates were the fastest. Chapter 4585. Qin Mo was also there. In fact, this result was expected. In fact, it was also fair to Yi Xiangnan because Ihuan lived with Shanting every day. When Shanting came back from abroad, Ihuan would be in puberty, and Yi Xiangnan would probably be busy with the business of Stars Entertainment. This starting point was fair to them. However, Ihuan didn't think so. In her heart, Shanting was already a child of her family, and she was always biased. Ihuan was a little dissatisfied. Afterward, she complained to Qin Mo, Didn't Ihuan know? Didn't you hurt Shanting's heart? This child is mature and sensible, but she must be sad. Regarding this, Qin Mo only said that he respected Shanting's decision. Seeing that Ihuan still wasn't convinced, he smiled. You don't know. This is a man's pride. Only women care about this. Ihuan looked at him suspiciously. Qin Mo smiled. You don't understand the world of men. Ihuan was speechless, but there was nothing she could do. Qin Mo was right about one thing. It was that Shunting was proud. Later, He Huan talked to Shunting for a while, and indeed, men understood men. Later, she didn't say anything, but she knew that from then on, Shunting would draw 100 milliliters of blood and put it in the blood bank every month. Later, when he went abroad to study, he would come back every 2 months to draw 300 milliliters of blood. Therefore, the blood that Yi Huan used was all Shunting's, including one time when she bled heavily and used 2,000 milliliters. It was all the blood that was drawn from Shunting's body. At this time, Shunting came back from the doctor's office. Yi Huan was accompanied by Yi Xiangnan. When the door of the ward opened, Yi Huan looked up and saw Shunting. She called her brother, very cheerfully. At least, she was happier than last night. Shunting thought that it was probably because Yi Xiangnan was with her now, so she was in a particularly good mood. Shunting smiled and didn't mention last night. He just stood by the bed and reached out to touch her little head. "Are you better?" Yi Huan sweetly said, "Much better, Gidge. I dreamed of eating red beans." She stuck out her tongue. "It's really disgusting." Shunting's facial muscles twitched slightly. After a moment, he smiled. "Red beans are good for blood." Yi Xianen looked at Shunting thoughtfully and had a rough idea of what was going on. However, he didn't expose her. With Yi Xiangnan around, Shunting felt that it was a little boring to stay, so he let out a sigh of relief. "It's good that you're fine. I'll go back first. I still have some homework." Yi Huan was reluctant and a little disappointed. "Brother Shunting, you just got here and you're leaving?" After she finished speaking, Shunting stared at her with a strange gaze. It was the same for Yi Xiangnan. After a long time, Shunting smiled and said, "I'm going home tomorrow. Be good and rest well." He paused for a moment. "Otherwise, I'll have to drink red beans again." Yi Huan's face was filled with disdain. Shunting smiled very faintly and didn't say anything more. Later, he went out first. Qin and Mo arranged a car to send him back, mainly because Shunting really needed to rest. Yi Xiangnan caught up with Shunting at the door. "Wait a minute." Shunting stopped. He turned his head and looked at Yi Xiangnan, the only male member of the noble Yi family. As long as he was willing, he was a boy with a bright future in politics or business. The only thing that Shunting envied about him was that Yi Xiangnan was Yi Huan's brother Xiangnan. He worked hard and adapted to his circumstances. But now, Shunting didn't have the qualification to adapt to his circumstances. He wasn't outstanding enough. Even mentioning that he liked him would be an insult to himself. Like new wife number 1. Husband addicted to spoiling. Please collect. New wife number 1. Husband addicted to spoiling. Play bar is the fastest to update. Chapter 4586. The two equally good-looking and outstanding boys sized each other up. The long corridor of the hospital was dead silent. After a long time, Yi Xiangnan finally said, "Why didn't you tell her?" At this moment, he was so calm that he didn't look like a jealous young man in the mall at all. Instead, he looked like a thoughtful adult. Shunting never dared to underestimate Yi Xiangnan, so he wasn't surprised that he would say this. He looked at Yi Xiangnan and lowered his voice slightly. "There's no difference whether I tell her or not. She never lacks people who donate blood or can accompany her. Those things can be done by volunteers and nurses, so it doesn't matter to me whether she knows or not. Even if she knows, she will at most rely on me a little, and that isn't a good thing for me, Yi Xiangnan, right?" Before, Yi Xiangnan had underestimated him, but now he didn't dare to think like this at all. Although the education that Shunting received was different from his, it didn't mean that Shunting wasn't as outstanding as him. On the contrary, he was more mature. The two teenagers looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Shunting spoke first. "Take good care of her." He turned around and left. His slender figure of more than 170 centimeters was very handsome. Yi Xiangnan stared at his back for a while before raising his voice. "I don't believe that you're so generous." Shunting paused, and a moment later, his voice was heard. "She has to go home eventually. The person who spends time with her every day is me." Yi Xiangnan thought about his words and then said mockingly, "Home? Shunting, you can never be a family with her. At most, you'll be the highest level worker in the Qin family." If you don't believe me, we'll see. Shunting lowered his eyes and smiled faintly. He didn't pay attention to him and left directly. Yi Xiangnan stood where he was and looked at Shunting's back. He was a little annoyed. It seemed that he had won, but in fact, had he? No. Shunting was very calm from the beginning to the end. It was Yi Xiangnan who was in a difficult situation. He could not keep his cool. He was very impetuous. Initially, he had not thought much of Shunting, but now he no longer saw it that way. Their starting line was actually about the same. The Qin family no longer only had King Entertainment, but a very large financial group. As for him, Yi Xiangnan, if he did not want to lose, he had to run hard. A child born into a wealthy family was easier to understand than the average person, and it was easier to accept in human torment. Yi Xiangnan stood there for a long time. When he returned to the ward, Yi Huan was sitting on the pink bed, wearing a set of pink pajamas. He was stunned for a moment before he remembered that Yi Huan hadn't worn pink for a long time. She kept saying that she wanted to learn from Aunt Qin Shun, but now she obviously wanted to wear a dress. Yi Xiangnan thought that Shunting must have changed her. There was something in his mind, but he walked straight to her and said in a low voice, "Don't you want to sleep for a while?" As he spoke, he sat down and ran his fingers through her short hair. Yi Xiangnan sighed softly. He thought that he liked her very much. There was still at least 10 years before she grew up, but he was sure that he would always like her. As for Yi Huan, he did not know. She was still a child and had not settled down. She called him Big Brother Xiangnan, and she also called him Big Brother Shunting. And who was the disappointment in her eyes? Who was she wearing a dress and long hair for? Yi Xiangnan did not dare to think about it. New wife number 1. Husband, addicted to pampering. The error-free chapter will continue to be updated on Handheld Bar. There will be no advertisements on the site. Please bookmark and recommend Handheld Bar. New wife number 1. Husband, addicted to pampering. New wife number 1. Hubby, I'm addicted to pampering. Handheld Bar was the fastest to update. Chapter 4587. Yi Xiangnan didn't dare to think about it, but he didn't want to. Yihuan's expression was very clear. She raised her little head and asked him, "Did you see Brother Shunting? Is he angry? I think he's angry with me." The string in Yi Xiannan's heart snapped in an instant. He thought to himself, as expected, in Yihuan's heart, he and Shunting were the same. She was too young, and he couldn't force her to know the difference between the two feelings. He only knew that he was crazy jealous at this time and very uncomfortable, but he could only endure it. If Shunting could endure it, so could he, Yi Xiangnan. Probably because his expression was too ugly, Yihuan noticed it and asked softly, "Brother Xiangnan, are you angry too?" "No," he replied, but his voice was always stiff. Yihuan looked at him for a long time, and then suddenly burst into tears. Brother Xiangnan and Brother Shunting didn't like the baby anymore. Yihuan felt that she didn't do anything wrong. She was so seriously injured, and she was very obedient. Why were they angry and angry? Yihuan cried very hard, and her voice was loud. Yi Xiangnan pursed his lips, and there was a little annoyance on his face. If it was in the past, he would coax her well, but today, because of Shunting, he was annoyed. In the end, it was the father who coaxed his little daughter. Yi Xiangnan stayed for a while to make sure she was okay, and then left. When he left, the 12-year-old boy was a little overwhelmed because he had nowhere to put his feelings. The 12-year-old Yi Xiangnan couldn't deal with such complicated feelings. If it wasn't for Shunting, he could slowly grow up or spoil Yihuan like a princess. But now, Yi Xiangnan was caught off guard. He clearly knew that she liked him in her heart, even if it was from a child's mouth, but he still affected her. Shunting was right. Shunting and Qin Yihuan were together every day. Yi Xiangnan suddenly had nowhere to put his feelings, and he needed to adjust. He knew in his heart that he had lost, so it was very ungentlemanly. Yi Xiangnan closed the door at the door and then opened it. Yihuan was lying on Qin Mo's shoulder, and her little body was twitching. Yi Xiangnan's heart ached. It was his own fault that he couldn't adjust his emotions, but he vented his anger on Yihuan, the little girl he loved. Yi Xianan slowly walked over until his face was level with Yihuan's. He called out to her softly, Yihuan's little head immediately hooked up, her big watery and tender eyes staring at him, and she even unconsciously called out Big Brother Nan. Yi Xiannin picked her up and patted her. "It's my fault." Then the little guy burst into tears again. Yi Xiangnan coaxed the little guy for a long time. After about half a day, the little guy finally stopped crying. Towards this, he was also very helpless. Later, Yihuan stayed in the hospital for another day. After that, she did not go home directly. Instead, she was picked up by the Yi family and stayed for a week. Yihuan was dissatisfied with this arrangement. On the day that Yihuan went to the Yi family, she and Qinemo had a big fight. Originally, she needed to care about Shun Ting's existence, but most of her anger was because of Shun Ting. Therefore, the quarrel was very fierce. Shun Ting, who also lived on the second floor, could naturally hear it. He slowly put down the book in his hand, his face expressionless. Chapter 4588. He just slowly put down the book in his hands, his face expressionless. Actually, as a man, he could understand why Qinemo was doing this. To Qinemo, Shun Ting was more of a guardian of King Entertainment or the Qin family's other businesses, or Qin Yihuan's. This was more meaningful than him being Yihuan's husband. Qinmo's arrangement was well-intentioned. It might not be very fair, but it was completely fair and cruel. If either he or Yi Xiangnan couldn't accept it and gave up, they would lose. Not to the other party, but to themselves. Shun Ting's gaze landed on the book, and he sighed softly. In the end, he picked up the book and focused on reading. But he knew in his heart that he was missing a certain person. She must be very happy now, with Yi Xiangnan by her side. Shun Ting could almost foresee how hard it would be for him in the future, and how he would lose to Yihuan's love. But he had never thought of turning back. From a moment he saw her photo, he had never turned back. His pride wouldn't allow him to turn back. In the master bedroom, Yihuan and Qinemo were still arguing. Yihuan's health wasn't good, but she was especially excited at this moment, as if she was on steroids. Qinemo was helpless. He reached out to pull her to his side, but Yihuan avoided him. She looked at him with a domineering attitude. "Qinemo, I don't care what you think, but Shun Ting is at home. You know he likes Yihuan, so he gave 500 drops of blood to Yihuan. How can you be so cruel?" Qinmo's gaze landed on her face. After a long time, he said irritably, "This has never been important, and Shun Ting doesn't care about this. If a sensible boy is restricted by what he has to give, then this kind of relationship is too petty. Yihuan, you don't understand men well enough, and you don't understand Shun Ting well enough." Yihuan was a little angry in an instant. "I don't understand you well enough, do I?" Qinemo didn't say anything and just stared at her quietly. Yihuan and Yihuan were still facing each other. After a long time, Qinemo said in a much calmer tone, "Why would you think that?" He wanted to touch her again, but Yihuan still backed away. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Qinemo, I really don't understand you." As she said that, she lowered her gaze. "You've always been able to do whatever you want. It's the same for me, and it's the same for Yihuan. Yihuan is only a child." Qinmo's gaze became a little deep. After a long while, he said lightly, "It is precisely because she is a child that we follow her heart. Yihuan, I know you like Shun Ting very much, but don't forget that Yihuan is our child. No matter what happens in the future, I hope that she can marry love." So when the Yi family proposed to let Yihuan go, he didn't hesitate, because Yihuan wanted to be with Yi Xiangnan. Qinemo just hoped that Yihuan could choose someone she liked while she was with the two children. If she chose Yi Xiangnan, then the career would be Shun Ting's compensation. If Yihuan chose Shun Ting, the Qin family's career would become Shun Ting's responsibility. This kind of thinking seemed contradictory, but it couldn't be more reasonable. Yihuan had nothing to say after he said this, but she was still angry. After a long time, she said stiffly, "I'll go see Shun Ting." Chapter 4589. After a long while, she said stiffly, "I'm going to see Shun Ting." A big hand pressed on her shoulder. It was Qinemo. He said, "I'll go. I have something to talk to him about. Ihuan looked at him suspiciously. Qin Mo smiled. What? You don't believe me? Ihuan stopped talking. At that moment, she also felt physically and mentally exhausted. She leaned back on the sofa. She didn't say anything and just looked at Qin Mo. Qin Mo saw her angry look and found it funny. He couldn't help but reach out to tease her. Ihuan is so young. Look at you. You get so angry because of such a small thing. What will you do in the future? Ihuan completely ignored him. He continued to tease her, but Ihuan slapped him away. Qin Mo, aren't you going to see Shanting? Qin Mo smiled. Yes. Before he left, he squatted down and said gently, All right, I'm not angry anymore. Ihuan turned her head away. Her awkward look made her feel a little emotional. Qin Mo chuckled. All right, I'm going to talk to Shanting first. We'll make up when I come back and have a small meeting. Okay. Ihuan wanted to say go to hell, but she held back. Qin Mo smiled and tugged at her hair before he got up. He left in high spirits again. Ihuan was left alone on the sofa. She clenched her fists and bit her lip. How could she be charmed by his beauty? She was so angry just now, but Qin Mo just smiled at her, and she couldn't help herself. Damn it! Even though she was already used to his looks, even though there were plenty of good-looking old cured meats and little fresh meats in the entertainment industry, she seemed to fall for it. While Ihuan was gritting her teeth, Qin Mo knocked on Shanting's bedroom door. Shanting was reading and was surprised. He immediately stood up. Uncle! Qin Mo walked over and patted him on the shoulder. He said with a smile, All right, sit down. Don't be so restrained. Shanting nodded and sat on the small sofa with Qin Mo. There was a book on his lap, and his fingers were gently stroking it. Qin Mo was a straightforward man who liked to cut to the chase. His gaze fell on Shanting's face, and he smiled slightly. How are you feeling? You've lost a lot of blood, so you should rest for a few more days. Shanting shook his head. I'm fine. Qin Mo didn't continue on this topic. He thought for a moment before saying in a low voice, Shanting, if I were to give you a choice now, it would be to give up on Ihuan and groom you to be the successor of King Entertainment. His voice was slow and persuasive. Now, you can choose again. This was a huge temptation for a boy. It meant that he wouldn't have to suffer in the future and could have the results he wanted. He was just Shanting, an accessory to Qin Ihuan. It was a huge temptation, but Shanting still rejected it. He said softly, I want to wait for her to grow up. Qin Mo smiled. All right, I respect your decision. He had only come to ask this question. It had nothing to do with comforting him. He was a boy, so he had to be able to bear it. After Qin Mo left, Shanting wanted to continue reading, but he couldn't bear it anymore. In the end, he took out his phone and opened it. There were photos. They were of Ihuan. He stared at them for a long time. On the other side, Qin Mo returned to his bedroom. When he opened the door, he saw Ihuan leaning on the sofa. Chapter 4590. Updated quickly. On the other side, Qin Mo returned to his bedroom. When he opened the door, he saw Ihuan leaning on the sofa. She looked up and stared at Qin Mo's face. Is he okay? Qin Mo walked over and sat beside her. He reached out and pulled Ihuan in his arms. She didn't struggle. Qin Mo gently rubbed her hair and smiled gently. The child I picked isn't so fragile. She's not like a little girl who gets angry when things don't go her way. Ihuan glared at him. I'm not a little girl, and I'm not angry. Qin Mo laughed. You're still denying it? Look at how many times you've argued with me for Shanting. Ihuan lowered her eyes and didn't speak for a long time. Qin Mo kept looking at her with a gentle gaze. After some time, Ihuan finally said bitterly, Qin Mo, you're actually far more affectionate and heartless than I thought. I know you're very rational, and you're also much more merciless than I thought. I know you're very rational, and you've made the right choice, but perhaps I'm too emotional. I can't accept that we're actually on different channels. Ihuan stared into Qin Mo's eyes as she said, but in my heart, I feel that you're right and wrong. After all, Ihuan is still so young. I don't think that time has come. Qin Mo lowered his eyes and smiled faintly. She's still young, but the Qin family's business can't stop. Ihuan, You've said so much and calculated so much, but you haven't considered the unexpected. If something happens to me one day, who will the family rely on? All these years, you've been focusing on filming and managing the Qin family's business. Iwan is too young. Iwan didn't allow him to continue. She covered his lips to stop him. However, Chinamo pushed her away and said in a low voice, Iwan, there are always accidents in life. I'm not doing this for the Qin family. I'm doing this for you and Iwan. I want you to live a decent life, even if I'm not around. After he finished speaking, he stared straight at Iwan. Iwan had already fallen silent. She pursed her lips and did not speak for a long time. Chinmo's voice was very gentle. Are you angry? Iwan looked down. You're angry. Can't I be angry at you for saying such things? If I were you, how would you feel? Chinmo held her hand and said in a more gentle voice, I won't be happy, but we have some plans for the future. Iwan bit her lip. I don't want to hear that. Chinmo's expression was a little gentle, and his voice was low and husky. I'm just saying, it didn't really happen, Iwan. As he spoke, he was probably a little excited himself. His voice was a little low. I won't let that happen. Iwan was not in a good mood. After a long time, she said, Chinamo, I don't want to hear that. He smiled. That's because you care about me. Iwan, I'm happy. But I'm a man, and a man has to take responsibility. I have to make arrangements for a woman. Don't you think so? Iwan shook her head and did not say anything else. She buried her face in Chinmo's arms and did not say anything else. Chinmo knew that she was feeling uncomfortable, so he did not say anything. He did not say in the past, because she did not have him in her heart. Later on, when she did have him in her heart, he would not say it. Today, he did not know why, but he said it. After saying it, she was still sad. Chapter 4591. Iwan didn't make a sound. She just leaned into his arms. Chinamo smiled faintly. He just hugged her and did nothing else. He just wanted to feel her existence. After a long time, Iwan pushed him. Okay, it's time to sleep. Chinamo looked at her with a strange gaze. Iwan glared at him. Don't even think about it. It's a sin to think about it. Chinamo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out and pinched her cheek. Don't be naughty. If you continue to be naughty, I'll hit you, yeah? Iwan looked at him eagerly. Yeah, where is it? Chinmo's expression became even more thought-provoking. He hit her once before getting up. His slender body walked to the bathroom. Iwan turned her head and lay on the sofa, looking at Chinmo. She was attracted to him again. After a long time, her face was a little hot. She snorted. It's a sin to think about it. This matter was over. Iwan was living in the Yi family, so it was convenient for her to be taken care of. After all, Iwan's movie, Twin, was about to premiere. Chinmo had a lot of things to do in his company and Iwan's movie. He couldn't split himself. This was also one of the reasons why he left Iwan in the Yi family. 2:14, the day finally arrived. King Entertainment's Best Actress, Xianglan, announced that she had been married for 4 years. The other party was a rich businessman. Her Weibo was directly exposed to the top searches, with the index increasing by 800. During the interview, Xianglan also announced that she would be retiring from acting and even praised the production crew of Twin. She said that AI Meng Meng was one of the most talented actresses she had ever seen. She had high hopes for Twin and also had high hopes for AI Meng Meng. She even tagged AI Meng Meng on Weibo. To be honest, one of them was an A-list celebrity whose status far exceeded AI Gia's and had more than 100 million followers on Weibo. The other was just a C-list celebrity who was surrounded by negative news. Now that they had received advice from a celebrity, the celebrity immediately retreated from the entertainment industry. This kind of operation was very much like a senior guiding a junior. AI Meng Meng gained more than 1 million fans, and they were all active fans. She went from being a has-been celebrity with negative news to becoming the center of attention. Her guest appearance in Twin also received attention because Xianglan even tagged the cast of Twin. Furthermore, Twin was premiering at 8 p.m. At this time, according to Cat Eye statistics, the number of people who wanted to watch Twin had already reached 140,000. This number was not shocking when compared to a commercial film, but it was already very shocking when compared to an artistic film. Furthermore, as of 6 p.m., the pre-sales had already exceeded 100 million. AIG's crew saw that things weren't going well, so they threw a bucket of dirty water at AI Meng Meng. They wanted to pull down Twin's popularity among the people. However, because of their goddess, no matter what they did, it wouldn't work. Fortunately, the box office on that day crushed Twin. After a day of screening, it had earned more than 300 million. AI Jiao was very confident. So what if it had a good reputation? Box office was what mattered. She got someone to write an article specifically to suppress Yihuan. It was also to disgust her. The topic was that the box office earnings of Twin were terrible. Even with Xianglan's support, it was useless. The script was already published, and it even bought the top spot on the trending searches. However, very quickly, the top trending search was the premiere of Twin. But that wasn't the most important thing. What was the topic that dominated the search list for the whole night? Hashtag Yihuan, the director of Twin. Looks weak. Hashtag recreating Yihuan's fairy-like looks. Hashtag how can Yihuan be so beautiful. Hashtag Yihuan lives in a big villa. Chapter 4592. In one night, the number of comments about Yihuan had reached a staggering 1 billion. She had always kept a low profile and only had 8 million followers on Weibo. Now, her followers had shot up to 20 million. She was equivalent to a popular celebrity, and most of them were fans of her looks. They were not there for her talent at all. At this time, at the venue of the premiere of Twin, Yihuan and Chinemo were walking the red carpet. The weather was a little cold, but Yihuan still wore an evening gown. Chanel's classic little black dress had a strapless spaghetti strap style, revealing the fair skin of her neck and beautiful lines. There was only a single diamond on her neck, and the waist of the dress was tight, while the bottom was a long muslin dress. The combination of white and black, coupled with her perfect face, made her look like a little fairy. Yihuan gave off the feeling of being pampered. She was 33 years old, but at that moment, she looked like she was only 23. Beside her, the outstanding Qin Mo looked even more mature. Shenting also walked the red carpet with them. He and Qin Mo stood on both sides of Yihuan. Yihuan held Qin Mo's arm with one hand and held Shenting's hand with the other. While everyone was wondering about the background of this good-looking boy, Shenting was introduced to the public in a public way by Qin Mo. This was also a form of pressure, but also a form of tacit approval. Shenting was already a member of the Qin family. He could come and go with Qin Mo at any time. His status was naturally high. At that moment, the three of them stood in front of the signing board and took their first group photo. Of course, their family photo was later published in King magazine. There was also a group photo of Shenting and Yihuan sitting alone on the sofa. Yes, they looked like brothers. And now, the group photo of the three of them was quickly on Weibo. Hashtag godlike looks of the family of three. Hashtag Yihuan is a winner in life all in all. Shenting became popular in an instant. Some talent scouts even had ideas about him. But when they thought about how he was personally brought up by Qin Mo, they thought that he would not walk the path of an artist. After Yihuan and Qin Mo walked the red carpet, they accepted an exclusive interview. Shenting was also there, and he performed exceptionally well. He was outstanding and generous, and his aura did not lose to Qin He and his wife at all. After the interview, Yihuan walked into the auditorium and asked Qin Mo, "I don't think Rongyu and AI Meng Meng are here." As she said that, she said with some worry, "I'm a little worried about AI Meng Meng. Will she not come?" Today, her negative news was brought up again. She has been on the hot search list for more than 30 times. I'm afraid that she will be traumatized and not dare to come out. Qin Mo looked at her and said, "You're the one who made her the most searched topic, right? Mrs. Qin, you really love AI Meng Meng." Yihuan snorted softly. "You're the true love." She regretted it as soon as she finished speaking. Her unintentional words had simply given Qin Mo an advantage. So she glared at him. Qin Mo laughed. "Yes, I'm your true love." Yihuan was speechless. She took out her phone from her handbag and dialed Rong Yu's number. But after 2 minutes, no one picked up. Huan was a little worried and looked at Qin and Mo. Is he really not coming? Qin and Mo was still smiling. He will come. Huan glanced at him. How did you know? Are you that good? Qin and Mo didn't say anything. He just looked at Huan with a meaningful look. Huan's face turned red. Qin and Mo laughed again and said hatefully, blushing so easily, "You're really like a little girl now." Chapter 4593. Qin and Mo smiled again and said hatefully, "You're blushing so easily. You're really like a little girl now." He even turned around and looked at Shunting. "Do you think your aunt is a little girl?" Shunting couldn't interrupt, so he pursed his lips and smiled. Qin and Mo was in a good mood and said, "Go sit down and wait. There's still some time before the premiere." Huan couldn't help but look up at him and ask, "Why aren't you worried at all?" Qin and Mo looked at her for a long time before he chuckled softly. "What do I have to worry about? This is AI Mingming's life and Rong Yu's wife's life. It's not my wife's life." Huan was a little shocked. She bit her lip and said softly, "That's not right. You've put in so much effort. If AI Mingming doesn't come, wouldn't it be a waste?" Qin and Mo knocked her on the head. "Why are you so silly? Think about it yourself. What I did is what I did. If she doesn't come, it's her loss, not mine, isn't it?" Huan was once again struck dumb by his reasoning. She nodded and said, "Yes, yes, yes. You're right." Qin and Mo pinched her little nose. "Of course I'm right, so you have to listen to me." Huan snorted. These sweet scenes were portrayed in the cameras of the reporters and became a hot topic again and again. Just an hour before the premiere, Rong Yu was looking at his wife with a book in his hand in his luxurious apartment. AI Mingming was sitting on the sofa watching TV, but he knew that she was absent-minded because her eyes were not focused. After watching for a while, he asked her gently, "Have you decided not to go?" AI Mingming nodded. "I'm just a supporting character, not even a part, so I'm not going." After she said that, Rong Yu didn't say anything for a long time. AI Mingming couldn't help but turn around and look at him. "Actually, you can go." Rong Yu smiled gently. "Why would I go if you're not going?" As he spoke, he lowered his head to read his book, looking calm and composed. AI Mingming pretended to continue watching TV, but after a while, she couldn't help but ask him, "Why didn't you persuade me?" Rong Yu was very calm and smiled. "Persuade what?" AI Mingming was startled and said, "Persuade me to go to the premiere." After she said that, Rong Yu gave a long, "Oh," and then lowered his head to focus on his book again. AI Mingming couldn't wait any longer, so she moved a little closer and said very softly, "You really don't want to?" Rong Yu nodded again. AI Mingming could not hold it in any longer. "They made me sound really bad." Rong Yu finally put down the book in his hand and looked at her quietly. His voice was slow and gentle. "Mingming, no matter what the outside world says, I will bear it with you and face it together." AI Mingming was a little touched. She bit her lips and said guiltily, "Rong Yu, I'm sorry." He smiled faintly, then thought for a while and said, "Oh yeah, I got someone to buy a piece of land in the countryside 2 days ago." AI Mingming was a little surprised by his change of topic, so she asked him, "Why did you buy land?" Rong Yu said naturally, "Build a house and raise some chickens and ducks. Just the two of us living together. We won't see outsiders, we won't use cell phones, and we won't have children. We'll reduce our contact with the outside world. That way, we can stand aloof from the world, and no matter what people say, it won't hurt us, right?" Chapter 4594. Rong Yu said naturally, "Build a house and raise some chickens and ducks. Just the two of us will live together. We won't see anyone outside, we won't use our phones, and we won't have kids. We'll reduce our contact with the outside world. That way, we can stand aloof from the world, and no matter what others say, they won't be able to harm us, right?" AI Mingming looked at him with a blank expression. After a long time, she said softly, "Why do I find this a little weird? Rong Yu, are you mocking me?" She had always thought that he would at least avoid it when she asked. However, not only did Rong Yu not avoid it, he even said straightforwardly, "Yeah, you're not that stupid after all." She thought that he was going to get angry again, but Ronyu lowered his head to read his book again. AI Ming Ming was especially shocked. She couldn't help but go over and pull his arm. Her voice was very delicate and soft. Actually, you want me to go, don't you? Ronyu snorted softly again as a reply. AI Ming Ming looked at him for a long time and finally couldn't help but ask softly, "If I go, will you be very happy?" Ronyu looked up at her, his gaze focused and quiet. After a long time, he said softly, "If you go, it's for yourself." AI Ming Ming was a little displeased. "Can't you say something nicer?" Ronyu smiled warmly and warmly. He had always been a gentleman. Seeing her like this, he would look at her warmly. AI Ming Ming didn't say anything and just looked at him. After a long time, she finally said, "All right then, I'll go. Otherwise, people will say that I'm going to hide for the rest of my life." Ronyu smiled even more warmly and closed the book in his hands. "I didn't say that. All right, since we decided to go, let's get changed and go." He got up, and AI Ming Ming grabbed his arm. "Ronyu, did you already know that I would go?" He stood up and lowered his head. His gaze met hers, and he smiled. "I know you're not happy either." As he spoke, he went to change his clothes. AI Ming Ming sat where she was and murmured, "It's that simple." Ronyu probably heard it. His voice came from the direction of the changing room. "It's always that simple. Life is actually very simple. Black and white. Yes and no. How can there be so much ambiguity? If it's always like that, it'll be too tiring." AI Ming Ming couldn't help but retort, "You make it sound so easy, as if everything is very simple. Then in the future, you'll be the one to take out the garbage at home." Ronyu had already changed into a new set of clothes. He smiled amiably and said, "I say, you must have a pig's brain. You can't even sort garbage. Isn't it a waste to live in this world? Food, right? Or air?" AI Ming Ming asked angrily. She had long forgotten what he had said before. Ronyu was still smiling casually. After a while, he spoke again. "It's Ronyu. Aren't you wasting such a good Ronyu by being so stupid?" AI Ming Ming savored it and felt that her husband was invincibly shameless. He didn't seem to be like this in the past. She walked forward and tugged on his tie gently. What made Mr. Rong so shameless? Ronyu patted her hand gently and then smiled softly. "Aren't married men all like this?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.